You are tuned in to the Week in Review, presented by the Prosper Group, where the right turns to win online.
Join us each week as we take a look at what is happening in digital advocacy and politics with a right-of-center focus.
You are listening to the Prosper Group Week in Review podcast. Welcome to today's show. We're your hosts. I'm Dan Huber.
And I'm Caroline Alexander. On today's show, we'll be talking fundraising with PG's expert, Amie Eichman, and then we'll also be discussing how to engage your social media influencers list. Dan, let's kick things off with the AM rundown.
Well, looking at this past week's tracking, there's a few things going on. Probably not the most exciting week that we've had. Conversation around filibuster, which is something we continue to follow. It's actually down 55% this week, about 179,000 mentions in Twitter. Not too much to note there. Gas prices. So we're continuing to follow gas prices, and they went up 2 cents this past week. So again, a high since 7 years ago, before the Trump administration. And the conversation itself, though, was down 31%, about 45.3 thousand tweets. So I think part of that's just where we are in the middle of summer and how much traveling is going on, that sort of thing. But then there's a couple other things that we were watching this past week that are trending downward. So we looked at Biden text messaging or SMS. That conversation's down 69% to about 6.9 thousand tweets. Probably won't pay much attention to it anymore unless it gets some additional legs in the media or an online craze, but definitely something we've been watching. And in a similar fashion, Texas Democrats are down 40%. They're still at about 222,000 tweets, though. And I anticipate maybe we'll see something bounce back on that before everything's said and done. So that's one that we'll continue to watch a little bit. We've been paying a little more attention again to the border crisis. That conversation's back up 34% week over week. We saw about 33.7 thousand tweets or retweets or conversations about that. So definitely something that's getting a little bit of conversation, a little bit of attention. We looked at Bezos. I think almost anyone who's tuned in knows that Jeff Bezos spent 5 minutes in space over this past week. And so there was a lot of media attention there and a lot of it on social media, whether it be trolls or people just following the news. But we saw a 359% growth in Bezos, and that totaled about 961,000 tweets. So that's pretty significant. And then also we saw DACA, DACA, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's an immigration-related ruling that came down from a court in Texas, finding the program to be unlawful or illegal. And with that news, we saw a 1,314% bump related to DACA this past week for over 100,000, 114,000 tweets. If anyone's interested in receiving the AM rundown, you can go to prospergroupcorp.com/AM rundown and sign up there.
Well, lately we've been trying to focus on small dollar fundraising on the podcast. Last week we had shared some tips for making those really important fundraising selfie videos. And then this week, Dan got to catch up with Prosper Group's fundraising specialist, Amie Eichman, for a great interview on some of her fundraising tactics she uses here for us. So I hope you all enjoy.
I have the pleasure of introducing our special guest today on the Week in Review podcast, Amie Eichman. Amie is the fundraising specialist here at the Prosper Group. Her marketing career started in Wisconsin agencies servicing agricultural and food industry clients. After transitioning into the political digital space in 2016, Amie has become an online email fundraising pro. With attention to nuance and individualized strategies, She delivers enhanced ROI for clients' small dollar fundraising programs. When Amie isn't working, she enjoys spending time with her two dogs, Jameson and Finn, as well as cheering on her beloved Green Bay Packers. Amie, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here.
Before we get started, I always like to ask guests how they got their start in campaigns and politics. Can you tell us a little bit about your political origin story? How did you get your start?
Yeah, so back in high school, I got interested in politics mostly because I was super interested in history. And I had a really great history teacher that liked talking about politics. And then I didn't really get actually involved in politics until a few years later, when I had been working at a marketing agency, like you mentioned, for a few years. I wanted to make a change. I was considering going back to school, but then my sister at the time was involved in like the college Republicans and young Republicans. And she had a friend reach out to her asking her if she knew anyone that would be interested in working at an advertising agency for politics. She's like, well, funny you should ask. My sister's looking for a job. So I ended up moving down to Texas and working at an agency for a while. And then I've worked since then at a few different political agencies. And now I'm here at the Presper Group.
For the benefit of our listeners, one, what is digital fundraising? And two, how does it differ from fundraising as a whole?
So digital fundraising is basically the money a campaign raises online through digital efforts like ads, emails, organic posts, things like that. And then their overall fundraising is how much a campaign raises in general. So whether that's from major donors, fundraising events, other events, anything that they bring in money and they have to report on.
It seems like the perception is that to succeed in small dollar fundraising, you have to be some sort of a rabble rouser or a media darling. And obviously to get elected, people need to stand out a little bit and build support amongst a base. But do you have to have significant notoriety to be able to effectively fundraise online?
It certainly helps, but no, you can fundraise still, even if you're not, a household name or you haven't done something significant yet. It definitely helps kickstart things off easier if people already know who you are. But pretty much at this point in politics and digital, if you are running for a statewide office or a federal office or many offices, even lower than that, you can be successful with online fundraising. It's not just for the presidential candidates anymore.
Yeah, I get the sense, and correct me if I'm wrong here, back in the day when I started on campaigns, you went through and did the whole friends and family list and sent mail to them through snail mail.
Mhm.
Now I think it's the same thing. You really do it digitally, right?
Yeah, pretty much. It's how you connect with the people that are either going to be voting for you or live in your area. It's just a different way to connect, especially in this day and age. Everything is online anyways. So it's more likely that you're going to get an email from someone versus a letter. So it's just translating what the world is already doing over to politics.
Doing research, we see that presidential campaigns raise hundreds of millions of dollars online. And this probably isn't going to be the case for your members of Congress or even most of the governors. That's a lot of money. How do you right size online fundraising expectations for each campaign?
Yeah, so it depends on a lot of factors. It depends on who you are, like we mentioned. If you're a bigger name ID off the bat, you're probably going to start off stronger. It's also where you're starting from. Do you have a house file? Do you not have a house file? Because that'll take time to build and to introduce people to who you are and what you stand for. Also, who are you running against? Are you running against someone that's super famous, whether it's a Democrat or someone in the news a lot? Also, is it going to be a tight race or is it a safe race? All those factors determine what's your fundraising potential. While it's really important to invest based on size, there's always going to be some type of ceiling depending on those factors.
I got to tell you, I really enjoyed digging into online fundraising with Amie. She's so smart and knows how to drive results for our clients. She has an incredible story that she's going to share in next week's portion of the interview, where she talks about the ROI she got for fundraising for a governor's campaign. And pretty impressive. Is a great example of, the power that fundraising can have. Maybe sets a high bar that is hard for most candidates to achieve, but everybody really can see some positive results from online fundraising. And I think it's just kind of the meat and potatoes approach to fundraising these days. 20 years ago it was mail. Today email is an important tool to have as part of your fundraising, and then we build from there. But with that, Caroline, I'm going to turn the keys over to you so we can cover this week's digital action item.
Yeah, so I wanted to follow up on last week's digital action item because it's so important. And this week's we're following up on that. But last week we discussed identifying those social media influencers that are involved in your target audience. We hope that you all got your list going, because this week's digital action item is to piggyback off that and to continue to engage with those online influencers. So we want you to take that list that you created last week, hopefully. Make sure you're following these people on socials, whether it's their podcasts, it's their Twitter account, it's their Facebook. Make sure you're following them, and then reach out to at least 5 of those influencers. Introduce yourself, say what you're running for, say what's important to you, and just feel out the opportunities that may present itself. It could be to get in front of their audience, have a discussion with them, maybe provide some guest content for them. Any insights that they're willing to share that could be positive for your campaign is worth reaching out and contacting these people. Show that influencer that you love their content, like it, share it, be involved. And it just shows they really appreciate where you are. We think this is a great and easy way for you to get some FaceTime with these people, get more people involved with your audience, and just continue to spread your social sphere.
Yeah, I think what's really a key takeaway here is that when you start talking about influencers and engaging influencers, this is where you can really add some strength to your organic game on social media. I know a lot of people talk about organic, but being able to capitalize on interacting with relationships and people who help broadcast your message goes a long way. And that engagement that you receive through an organic approach saves money that you would have to spend on advertising to reach those same people. And quite frankly, makes your paid advertising easier when people start engaging with you more. So it's a win-win for everyone. But that's going to wrap things up this week. We really enjoyed having Amie Eichman on the show. We will have the second half of her interview next week. We'd like to thank you, our listeners, for listening to the show, and we'll talk to you next week.
You can find our Prosper Group Weekend Review podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
If you like the show, please subscribe and share.